A controversial farming practice leads police to Bakersfield. Jennifer Redding tells us why they're investigating allegations of animal abuse.
39 beef cattle in Bakersfield got a surprise visit from police and state officials Friday. They responded to this pasture on Joyelle Road after the town constable called with allegations of abuse.
Well, there's one dying, and we walked the perimeter and there's absolutely no water.
A local livestock vet examined each animal and told police a few were thin and one needed to be euthanized on the spot due to hypothermia. According to state law, cattle owners are required to provide adequate access to food, water, and shelter. The vet said these cows lacked all three.
Digging for blades of grass under 2 feet of snow is not feed. Snow is not considered a water source. Trees are considered a shelter, but they don't have access to any of the trees.
I don't need somebody badgering me for no reason, and I consider this close to badgering.
Gary Barnes and Todd Brown own the cattle. They say one of them tends to the herd every day, moving them from field to field to ensure they can find feed.
They've basically eaten down probably 5 acres worth of 17-inch tall grass that's got 3 feet of snow on it, so they have to work for it, but there's a lot of grass here still.
Why not just give them hay at that point?
Because it's expensive feed.
Plus, these farmers say winter grazing yields better beef and prevents their cows from standing in their own feces. Although they admit the practice is controversial, they don't believe it's abuse.
The conventional way is to barn the cow up, is to spend thousands of dollars putting hay in the barn so you can spend thousands of dollars hauling it out all winter.
I'd like to see these animals taken from this guy. He doesn't deserve to have them.
The owner told police he plans to move these cows to a farm but would not say where. In the meantime, the case is being referred to the state's attorney's office. What is your reaction to that you could even face a criminal charge in this?
I find it unbelievable. I find it unbelievable when I look at all the abuse that actually does go on. I don't consider my animals abused at all.
There's no timetable for prosecutors to wrap up their investigation. Jennifer Redding, Channel 3 News, Bakersfield.
Hi, my name is Sue Skaski with Vermont Volunteer Services for Animals Humane Society, and welcome to our show, For the Animals. Today we're talking about an issue with regard to cows being kept in Bakersfield, Vermont, and it's an issue that has made headlines in the newspaper and on the television. And with me here today to discuss this is Adam Steinberg. Adam's been on the show before. He is the owner of Yoga to Go, and he is an animal activist for many years. Thank you for joining me, Adam.
Thank you, Sue.
What I'd like to do is read the transcript WCAX covered as a quote, 39 beef cattle in Bakersfield got a surprise visit from police and state officials Friday, and this happened on December 27th. They responded to a pasture on Joyelle Road after the town constable called with allegations of abuse. Well, quote, there's one dying and we walk the perimeter and there's absolutely no water, said Jim Bilodeau, the Bakersfield constable. A local livestock vet examined each animal and told police a few were very thin and one needed to be euthanized on the spot due to hypothermia. According to state law, cattle owners are required to provide access to adequate food, water, and shelter. The vet said these cows lacked all three. Quote, digging for blades of grass under 2 feet of snow is not feed. Snow is not considered a water source. Trees are considered a shelter, but they don't have access to any of the trees, said Dr. Rick Bartholomew. Quote, I don't need someone badgering me for no reason, and I consider this close to badgering, said Gary Barnes, who co-owns the cattle with Todd Brown. Barnes and Brown say one of them tends to the herd every day, moving them from field to field to ensure that they can forage for feed. Todd Brown said, they've basically eaten down probably 5 acres worth of 17-inch tall grass. It's got 3 feet of snow on it, so they have to work for it, but there's a lot of grass still there. Reporter Jennifer Redding from WCAX said, why not just give them hay at that point? Todd replied, because it's expensive feed. Plus, these farmers say that winter grazing yields better beef and prevents their cows from standing in their own feces. Although they admit the practice is controversial, they don't believe it's abuse. Quote, the conventional way is to barn up the cow, is to spend thousands of dollars for the hay in the barn so he can spend thousands of dollars hauling feces out all winter, Barnes said. Quote, "I'd like to see these animals taken from this guy. He doesn't deserve to have them," Jim Bilodeau, the constable, said. Barnes told police he plans to move these cows to a farm, but he would not say where. In the meantime, the case is being referred to the state's attorney's office. Jennifer Redding asked, "What is your reaction that you could even face a criminal charge in this?" Gary Barnes replied, "I find it unbelievable. Unbelievable when I look at all the abuse that actually goes on. I don't consider my animals abused at all." There's no timetable for prosecutors to wrap up their investigation. In speaking with Constable Bilodeau, we learned that there have been other complaints with the keeping of cows by Gary Barnes. The cows are skinny going into this winter. They have had lice, never sufficient shelter or water. He wrote a letter to the state Albans paper, and he also reported that a letter by Gary Barnes was recently written to the St. Albans paper demanding an apology for what he says is being picked on. The poor man. A cow dies a slow death, suffering with hypothermia, under his care, and he wants an apology.
Crazy.
Crazy world, crazy world. A little fact. Cows used for milk production and beef require 30 to 50 gallons of water a day. Snow is an insufficient source of water. We're going to have Dr. Lynn Morrell, who is a veterinarian who's helped VBSA for 30 years in with regards to testifying in court with regards to sufficient and adequate food, water, shelter, sanitation, and medical attention. We have a call into Jim Hughes, who is the state's attorney for St. Albans, to ask him where it stands now. So, here we are. What I'd like to do is to go over the statutes with regard to animal protection. It's Title 13, Chapter 8. And if you wouldn't mind reading the highlighted, we could talk about each one.
The first definition, number 351, as used in this chapter, animal means all living sentient creatures, not human beings.
So we're talking about feeling animals, whether it's a cat, a dog, a pig, a cow, a horse. They're all sentient creatures, so they're all covered by this statute.
Number 7, necessary medical attention shall include but not be limited to medical treatment for illness, injury, disease, excessive paroxysm, or malformed or overgrown hoofs.
Okay, and I'm sure that these animals, by the way, that are being processed and eaten have not been checked for paroxysm or anything else that they might carry. I don't know, but that's a good question to ask the vet.
They shouldn't have lice, so.
Well, I'm sure they shouldn't have lice.
Number 10, torture or torment means omission, neglect, or an act by an animal owner or other person whereby physical pain, suffering, or death is caused or permitted to be caused to an animal.
So that's clearly when you have one animal out of several that are suffering due to underweight and have gotten to the point that they're hypothermic and have to be euthanized right there on the spot. That shows that they were not being given the necessary medical attention.
Number 11, livestock means cattle, bison, horses, sheep, goats, swine, etc.
Okay, so you've got right there the cattle falling under this.
Number 13, livestock and poultry husbandry practices means the raising, management, and using of animals to provide humans with food, fiber, or transportation in a manner consistent with A, husbandry practices recommended for the species by agricultural colleges and the U.S. Department of Agriculture Extension Service. B, husbandry practices modified for the species to conform to the Vermont environment and terrain. And C, husbandry practices that minimize pain and suffering.
Okay, and we do know that when they went on that investigation that day, the Agency of Agriculture, Jim Cameron, ordered them to bring hay immediately, which they balked at, but hay was brought for them. So right there, accepted animal husbandry is to feed, not allow them to dig between 3 and 4 feet of snow to try and get whatever grass might be there, and to try and eat snow, which will not provide enough water. That's not accepted agricultural practices. So there's really no, it's black and white. It's not cut and dry. In Vermont, anyway, it's not cut and dry.
16, adequate food means food that is not spoiled or contaminated and is sufficient quantity and quality to meet the normal daily requirements for the condition and size of the animal and the environment in which it is kept.
And I don't know how many pounds of hay an animal that large needs, but that's something that our veterinarian can address. But surely the animals are not able to forage underneath snow and get sufficient quantity. Or probably quality at this time of year.
That's correct, Sue. I'd like to see Gary out there foraging.
I'd like to see them both out there foraging.
An animal shall be fed or have food available at least once each day unless a licensed veterinarian instructs otherwise, or withholding food is in accordance with accepted agricultural or veterinarian practices.
Okay, and clearly that's not the case. The veterinarians have ordered that they be fed.
Here's the winner. 17, adequate water means fresh, potable water provided at suitable intervals for the species, and which in no event shall exceed 24 hours at any interval. The animal must have access to the water. 18, adequate shelter means shelter which protects the animal from injury and environmental hazards. The purpose of this subchapter is to prevent cruelty to animals.
Let's talk about environmental hazards. Depending on what time of year, environmental hazards in the summer might be excessive heat, sun. In the winter, we're looking at freezing temperatures. We're not only talking about below zero with the wind chill, you're talking about the animals having to forage through the snow to get at something, and then trying to eat the cold snow or ice for water. All environmental hazards that the shelter should be affording them protection.
And eating the snow adds to their hypothermia.
Right.
Livestock and poultry husbandry practices for raising, management, and use of animals. 352, cruelty to animals. Ties, tethers, or restraints an animal, either a pet or livestock, in a manner that is inhumane or is detrimental to its welfare. Livestock and poultry husbandry practices are exempted.
Again, from what we were told, there was a fence separating the cattle from the woods. And just being woods alone is not enough. I mean, if there were maple trees, they don't have any leaves to protect. Evergreens come down to the ground, or they should, to protect from the wind, the draft, the cold. But for these poor animals, they were in a pasture with a fence that blocked them, prevented them from getting to any shelter.
Totally exposed.
Totally exposed.
Deprives an animal which a person owns, possesses, or acts as an agent for of adequate food, water, shelter, rest, sanitation, or necessary medical attention, or transports an animal in overcrowded vehicles. Aggravated cruelty to animals. A person commits the crime of aggravated cruelty to animals if the person kills an animal by intentionally causing the animal undue pain or suffering, or intentionally, maliciously, and without just cause, tortures, mutilates, and cruelly beats an animal.
You know, I find it interesting that we've learned that last year he was reported for animal cruelty. And so he knows the first intent of the statute is to get somebody to come into voluntary compliance and educate them about the situation. They've had that opportunity.
Forfeit any rights to the animal subjected to cruelty and to any other animal, except livestock or poultry owned, possessed, or in the custody of the defendant. Enforcement, possession of abused animal, searches and seizures, forfeiture. The Secretary of Agriculture, Food, and Market shall be consulted prior to any enforcement action brought pursuant to this chapter, which involves livestock and poultry.
I think it's important that we as Vermont citizens speak up for animals that cannot speak for themselves. James Hughes, can be reached at his office, 524-7920. He's in St. Albans, and he's with the district attorney, and ask them to please take this case of animal abuse seriously and to prosecute both of these men. On the telephone is Constable Jim Bilodeau from Bakersfield, and he was at the property 2 weeks ago now, Jim, is it?
Yes.
Okay. And we have some questions for you. Thank you very much for joining us. Okay, with regard to the Bakersfield cattle incident, at the end of December, I know that you were on the scene. Can you tell me what happened when you arrived? Were you challenged by the landowner in any way?
Not the first time.
Oh, you've been there more than once?
Yes.
Okay, what happened?
Well, the first time and the second time when I was challenged.
How about both? Let's go both times.
Well, the first time, I was the first one there, and when I got there, I found the cows that I had to complain, and I went down and I looked at them, and I noticed that they were skinny, and so I contacted I found out who owned the cows, because I had several complaints on the man, you know, so I contacted the state police and the veterinarians to go look at them. So, of course, they contacted the Jim Cameron, the head of agriculture of the state of Vermont. He was there, and that's when I got him back the second time. When I got them guys there the second time, we had a cow that was dying of hyperthermia, you know. And first thing I walked over and checked that cow and tried to get it up, and I couldn't get it up. So the vet checked it and checked its temperature, and the temperature was low enough where there was no bringing it back. So he had to get permission from the guy that owns the cattle to put it down. So
now,
he gave the permission, and they euthanized the animal, you know.
How long, Jim, how long was it from the first time to the second time that you were there?
Well, it was a couple of days because Christmas was in the meantime. I mean, I went before Christmas, and, you know, everybody's shopping, you know, you can't get anybody, and so Christmas Eve and Christmas went through, and I went the next day, the day after Christmas.
Okay. So it's my understanding that the veterinarian on scene determined that the cows lacked food, water, and adequate shelter. Did the state address those issues right then and there?
Yes. What he did, he told the gentleman who owned the cattle they need to get hay to him immediately.
That was Jim Cameron?
Yes.
And did you see them deliver hay?
No, I wasn't there. I had left because I work for myself too, but they were taking care of it, and they didn't need me there any longer, so I had left. So, anyways, I get a call back from Trooper Anderson that he wanted me to bring him down hay, and he was going to stay there until I got down there. So I went down to see him. Because it's a process. I mean, I had to go get equipment and open and get hay in it, so it was kind of a thing. So I went to see him, and somebody had put a couple little small bales of hay for 39 cows.
Wow. Okay.
Just two little bales, you know. It wasn't enough.
So,
just not enough hay for them.
did you leave hay at that point?
I didn't bring any. No, I didn't bring any hay. Because it's not up to me to bring hay to somebody else's cows.
Right.
You know, he's not paying for it.
So tell me, do you know if, since he was ordered to bring hay by the Agency of Agriculture, do you know if they've continued to provide hay?
Well, every time I've gone down to check, there's not hay.
Okay, so it was a one-time, let's just shut them up. Can you tell me how much hay and water in a 24-hour each cow would require? Do you know the answer to that?
Well, if those cows are, if they can't do somewhat grazing, but they need to be supplemented with hay, they need at least a quarter of a bale of hay apiece.
Okay.
You know, to supplement them. They need something, and they need water, and they're not getting any water.
Right. What sort of shape are the cows in now, Jim?
They're really thin.
Now, there are two different types of cows there. Am I correct?
Yes, there's different types of beef cattle. There's some that are mixed with Angus, or some that are they're mixed. And there's a switched leg. There's the one that was euthanized. Was a dairy heifer.
Okay.
She was skin and bones. There's no way you can feed an animal like that without feeding her. You can't. You just can't. That's why she had to be put down.
Well, they said, according to the report, that they went there every day to check on the animals and to rotate. So obviously, they were checking with blinders on, or what?
I don't believe they go down every day. It's what they say, but I don't believe it.
Okay, well, you would know. You're right there. Is there a good chance that other cows have died as well at this point?
If they are, I didn't count them. There was 39, now there's like 38. There's supposed to be 38 of them in there.
Okay.
And I haven't been down to count them.
You know, okay, now with the warm weather coming in the next few days, we talked about the snow packing down. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, what it'll do is the snow will pack, and then it gets cold again. It's going to freeze, and so it's going to be really hard for them to get through that packed snow.
Yeah.
To get to the grass.
You know, you stated that there was no access to shelter when you were there, including natural shelter. What's the layout of the land?
The layout of the land is it's a field, and all they had was a fence on the perimeter of this field, and the fence did not go into the woods. It was just the edge of the woods, and the cows can get to the edge of the woods, and they're reaching, they're eating the pine trees. They're eating anything they can find. They're, they're just reaching over the fence and eating pine needles.
Okay. Do you know if there's been any follow-up by the Agency of Agriculture?
I don't think so. Maybe if they did, he hasn't called me, and I asked him to keep in touch with me. What's going on.
Okay.
And, I called him on another herd that was up down the road from that weren't being taken care of very well. But they're calling. They disappeared all of a sudden.
Okay. You've been back there. What did you see?
I went back today.
Okay. Any food?
No food.
Any water?
No water.
Figures. Okay, last...
Empty tank with snow in it.
I'm sorry?
An empty tank with snow in it.
Empty tank with snow in it. Okay, last question.
They got this trailer they pull around that's full of rock salt. They're giving them rock salt.
Rock salt?
They can eat snow. Rock salt.
Okay.
It's cheaper than giving them a salt block.
Okay, that must drive them crazy. Salt and no water. Okay, last question.
And not supposed to can't get water.
Yeah, in your opinion, is this accepted Vermont agricultural practice and one that Vermont should be proud of?
No.
Okay. All right, thank you, Jim, very, very much. And please keep us posted on this.
I will.
We're recording a television show that's shown on all the public access stations with regard to the Bakersfield cattle. And I understand that you did an article on them last week, and I believe you're doing a follow-up article now?
I will be, yes. The man alleged of animal cruelty will be at the select board meeting in Bakersfield on the 14th, so I'm going to go see what he has to say then and continue on with the story.
Okay. I had spoken this morning with a constable who has gone there and seen no evidence of food or water and continued lack of shelter. I guess at this point they might have rotated them where they may have access to shelter, but still no food or water, which is clearly against the statutes. It says adequate food, water, shelter, sanitation, and medical attention to be provided within a 24-hour period, unless withheld by a veterinarian, and certainly had the veterinarian that was there on site that said, this is not good.
And I don't know if you're aware of it, but it sounds like this has happened in the past. Bakersfield has two constables, and I spoke with both, and one actually said that he had received similar reports last year of animals living in filthy conditions, and he responded to the barn, and it seemed like at that point that things might have been taken care of, but now we're back here.
Was this with the same people, Jesse?
It was. I'm not sure if Mr. Brown was involved, but definitely Mr. Barnes, excuse me.
You know, that almost sounds familiar. Was agriculture in charge at that point to monitor the situation? Do you recall?
You know, I'm not sure. The constable I spoke with said that he had responded and talked to Mr. Barnes about it. I'm not sure who he, got involved in this case. But yeah, it sounds like he worked with the agriculture department. I'm not sure what their role was, but there was definitely some talks going on.
Wow. You would think that after the first episode, okay, that shows that they've been given the opportunity to be educated, so the second time around is just belligerence.
Yeah, you could probably say that, and Bakersfield for some reason is getting kind of a reputation of of animal cruelty right now after the puppy mill case, and now this one, if animal cruelty charges are in fact filed.
Right, and we do have some of the best laws on the books throughout the country, but it takes the commitment of law enforcement and the state's attorney throughout the state to prosecute once these situations are brought to their attention. Is there anything that you'd like to say that we can look for to reach out? Any thoughts that you have on this?
Well, I think this is an interesting case because Mr. Barnes has maintained his innocence. He's saying that his practices are not common here in Vermont, but they are elsewhere, and this is just how he farms, is my understanding. So I'm anxious to see what comes out of the select board meeting next Monday, just to see what what he's saying his practices are and what sort of farming will do for the cows.
The bottom line is Vermont law provides for these certain provisions, and I don't know where he's got his background from, but maybe he needs to go back there. Jesse, I understand that you talked to Mr. Barnes. Would you be able to talk with us about that conversation?
Absolutely. I called him on the Monday after the police visited his property. We received a press release, and so I wanted to make sure to get the whole story, and I gave him a call just to let him get his opinion out there. And what he is saying is that there's a farmer nearby who doesn't like him, and as a result calls the animal control officer all the time. He's saying that he's being targeted while nearby farmers are actually abusing their animals, is what he seems to think, and he's not sure why. He did bring in his own veterinarian to look at the animals, and he said that they were ruled fine. He called the select board members, and he says that the select board members were upset about this accusation against him. So we'll see how that comes out at the select board meeting on the 14th. But according to Mr. Barnes, he's the target here.
So everybody set him up. First of all, that sounds like the red herring. And second of all, it sounds like he's not taking responsibility for his actions. What are people going out there as he puts food down and pulling it away? He openly admits that he's not feeding and watering.
And it should be known probably, too, that he owns the meat lockers in nearby Enosburg, so he's selling the beef that he's raising.
Okay. Boy, it's certainly a tangled web up there. Okay. Well, it will be very... And the hearing, select board hearing on Monday is open to the public. Am I correct?
It is, yes. From my understanding, he called the town clerk and asked to be put on the agenda so that he can discuss this.
Okay.
And we'll see what happens there. And like I said, no charges have been filed yet, so he hasn't formally been accused of anything other than, being investigated. Well, so we'll see what comes out in the end.
Well, this is a big concern, that how many days afterward an animal has died, they're still not feeding, they're still not watering, we don't know if they have adequate shelter, nothing's been done. So I thank you very much for keeping on this. I think the only way that things ever change is for people to become involved, to be aware, and the power of the pen. Good for you.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Jesse.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Brian's office?
Hi, my name is Sue Skaskew. I'm trying to reach Jim Hughes. Is he available, please?
I don't expect him back in the office probably until Wednesday.
Okay. We're covering this for our television show For the Animals. Perhaps you can tell me if if any complaints have been filed with your office with regard to the withholding of food, water, and shelter on the cattle, and where that stands. These are the 39 head of cattle, one of which had to be euthanized on the spot for hyperthermia.
No, we don't have anything yet from the police.
Okay, we do know that every day that goes by, the cattle still are not being fed, watered, or sheltered, so that's a big concern.
Wasn't it the state police that had done the investigation?
Yes, Trooper Anderson.
Okay.
Even if he might be able to shoot me a fast email just to give me the latest on this.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay,
Okay,
bye-bye.